Kentucky basketball needed a scoring leader to add to this year's roster, and they finally got one in Jaxson Robinson.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, very exciting news. Jaxson Robinson has withdrawn from the 2024 NBA draft, and he is committed to Mark Pope and the Kentucky Wildcats. Going to dive into that on today's episode, just how significant this addition is to Kentucky's roster. They needed a proven score, and they got one. Also on today's episode, going to talk about a 4-star point guard in the 2025 class that is taking a visit to Kentucky later on in June. Pretty interesting score. Is Acaden Lewis going to talk about what he brings to the table and what he did during the most recent EYBL circuit. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. Let's go ahead and get into it. Jaxson Robinson is officially a Kentucky Wildcat. In case you did not see all of the drama that unfolded yesterday with the 2024 NBA draft withdrawal deadline, Robinson was supposed to make an announcement as to whether or not he was staying in the NBA draft or returning to college by midnight Eastern time. And of course, that time rolled around and there was no answer from Robinson as to whether or not he was going to stay or come back. And we waited and waited for a couple of hours after that, up until about 2 in the morning, and there was still no answer. So Kentucky fans went to bed kind of confused and kind of in shock that there was not an update. And then we got an update earlier today at about 11 o'clock that Kentucky was in fact going to get Jaxson Robinson. He's coming to Lexington. Not only was he withdrawing from the draft, but he was just straight up committing to Kentucky as soon as he pulled out, which is just insane that we didn't have to sit here and discuss whether or not he was going to go to BYU or Kansas. We talked about it on the show. If you've been listening for the past week or so, we talked about what people in BYU were saying about Robinson, about how Kentucky has really been the only school that can maintain contact with him over these past several weeks during the NBA draft combine. Kentucky and Pope were right there with him every step of the way. He hadn't really reached out to BYU. Kansas, as much as they may have been interested in him, he was not really having any conversations with Kansas. It was just exclusively Pope through the process. Super excited about this addition. Kentucky fans should be elated that they were able to bring in a true scorer to this roster a season ago at BYU. 14.2 points per game while shooting 42.6% from the floor, 35.5% from three, 90% from the foul line. Also averaged 2.5 rebounds, 1.3 assists, and 0.7 blocks per game. Up and down this roster, if you look at the different players at different positions, you'll see really good players that are efficient, especially when it comes to catch and shoot situations. Guys that fit this roster well, personnel-wise. But you don't really see a true proven scorer, somebody that's going to go out there and be a volume guy for you, regardless of whether or not he's efficient. Robinson perfectly fits the role that Kentucky needs at that position. Is he going to play shooting guard or small forward or maybe even a little bit of the four? That's something that we're going to have a conversation about as we continue to dive deeper into the summer and the offseason. By the way, Wildcats will start practices on June 17th. They will be working together then. Maybe we'll get a feel for where Robinson lands in this lineup, but they needed a score and they got one. And something that I've seen online and I've seen different people discuss is whether or not Robinson really does fit well at Kentucky because of the fact that statistically he's not as efficient as other players on this team. And I think that that is an interesting conversation to have because of the fact that Jaxson Robinson is still statistically above average when it comes to efficiency. He right now, again, like I mentioned, is averaging 35.4% from beyond the arc. That is 1.2% above the national average. He shoots 73.4% at the rim, which is 15% above the national average. He shoots 90% from the foul line. That's almost 19% above the national average. 1.6% above the average in true shooting percentage and 2.4% above the average in effective field goal percentage. He's gotten better essentially every single year that he's been in college when it comes to game score and usage rates. He has continued to also improve his game in terms of shot selection. I believe something that Brandon Ramsey of KSR pointed out is he has been really more intent on making shots inside the arc. He's really trying to hone that craft, and he jumped from about 47.5% to a little over 53% in terms of mid-range shots. Statistically, I think that is a really interesting spot to see Robinson in, especially when you talk about the players surrounding him and where they're going to be on the court in terms of space. I think that's a shot that Robinson will probably be able to get consistently this season. He's a good player. He is a good player that only played 26.5 minutes a season ago at BYU. My guess is that he'll be somewhere around that, if not more, for this season. Analytics say he's an above-average scorer who was able to knock down some shots with a decent efficiency rate at a high volume. Also, an interesting post here from Kyle Tucker over on Twitter. I'll see if I can pull this up for you guys really quickly. This is a notable tweet. According to Kyle Tucker of The Athletic, at Kyle Tucker _ATH, he said, in BYU's 6 best wins last season, Kansas, Baylor, Texas, Iowa State, and San Diego State, and NC State, Jaxson Robinson averaged 16.8 points, shot 41.5% from 3, and hit 16 of 17 free throws. He stepped up in the big moments when BYU asked him to. My only analysis here is he's a big shot taker. He's a big shot maker. He stepped up, I believe, also in the loss against Duquesne, if I'm not mistaken, in a big time way. He does really thrive in the moment, and even though his statistics are not as good as other players on this roster, I think that he is going to be the perfect go-to scorer for the Wildcats this upcoming season. Whenever I say compared to everybody else on this roster, I hope I'm very clear. Everybody else on this roster, outside of your Lamont Butler addition at point guard, every single player is really, really good at shooting the basketball, especially in catch-and-shoot situations. Like, Kentucky got some high-quality guys there. So just because Robinson is a few percentage points behind some of these different guys doesn't mean he's bad. He's actually still pretty dang good. So I don't think there's any concern there. I love this addition. I'm super excited about it. If you didn't see, go check out his Instagram, by the way. Him posting the boom picture on Instagram was really, really funny. Love this addition. Super excited to see where Robinson slides in this rotation. And at this point, the roster is pretty much done. Right now, Kentucky is focusing on Will Riley or Wooga Poplar to fill that final scholarship spot. Which one will they get? We'll talk about that over the coming weeks as Riley takes a visit, and hopefully Poplar does here soon. Let me know what you think about Jaxson Robinson coming to the Kentucky Wildcats. You can leave your thoughts in the YouTube comments below, or you can hit me on the socials at LockedOnUK. All right, we've got a 4-star point guard that has scheduled a visit to the Kentucky Wildcats. What do we know about him? How did he perform during the EYBL circuit? It was pretty dang good. Going to talk about that player in just a second. Before I do that, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time. It is playoff time in the NBA right now, and it has been super, super fun. And we are heading closer towards the finals as the Mavs and the Timberwolves play tonight. My expectation is that PJ Washington and the Mavs are going to be able to eliminate the T-Wolves, and Kentucky will have a player in the NBA Finals to face off against the Boston Celtics. Should be pretty fun. And let's say you're preying on Boston's downfall, as the kids would like to say, and let's say you want to go check out an NBA Finals game. Well, there is one place that you need to go to get your tickets, and that is Game Time. Game Time makes getting tickets to the NBA Finals even faster and easier, and prices on the app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and then their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. I have loved using Game Time over the past year or so, going to different MLB events, college football events, and now you can check out the NBA Finals here with Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying your NBA Final tickets with Game Time by downloading the app, creating an account, and using code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, continuing along here on the Thursday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Super excited about this addition to the roster. Jaxson Robinson coming on down to Lexington. Again, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you want to join the Locked On Kentucky Discord, would highly encourage you guys to do that. About 200 of you in there already, talking about all things Kentucky basketball, football, baseball, anything UK related. It's been super fun over the last 24 hours just getting to discuss different things with you guys about what's going on with Robinson and the program. If you want to join the Discord, it's free to join. At @LanceDawe_ on Twitter is where you can find it. It is a pinned tweet, the link to join the server. Would encourage you guys to join up. It's going to be a super fun place to just kind of chill, chat. As the season gets closer, I think it's going to be even more of a fun place to join, so go ahead and get in there. Again, at @LanceDawe_ on Twitter is where you can find that link. Okay, so Acaden Lewis has scheduled a visit to Kentucky. In case you don't know who that is, he is a 4-star point guard in the 2025 class at 6'2", 6'3". Different sites have him at 6'2", 6'3". Combo guard out of Washington, D.C. If I'm not mistaken, he was actually Gatorade Player of the Year in District of Columbia just a season ago. A really, really interesting scorer here. He's a top 100 prospect nationally, according to the 24/7 Sports composite rating system. He's the number 79 overall prospect, number 12 combo guard, and the number 3 player out of D.C. He's got a ton of different offers from some really solid programs in that area and throughout the college basketball landscape, and he has scheduled a visit to the Kentucky Wildcats. Apparently, he's going to be taking a visit on June 17th, according to On3. Kentucky has not made an official offer to Acaden Lewis, but they are definitely interested in him. When going and watching this kid's game, especially during the EYBL circuit, the most recent one in Indianapolis, something that I noticed about him is while he is a combo guard, scoring really does seem to be his strong suit. I mean, the distribution is there, the passing is there. It's just during that circuit, as opposed to what he was doing in his actual high school, his numbers and his tape, he was scoring a lot more during the EYBL, and they ran him a little bit more off ball at different times, and he was extremely effective doing so. And actually recently he talked about how he wants to become more of a point. He wants to run point in college, but whenever you watch his game, I really do think that he is a good outside shooter, and I think that he is somebody that would work well at shooting guard. Now, is the height and weight a little bit of a concern if you're playing shooting guard at 6'3", 6'2", 170 is what he's listed at? Maybe. So maybe he wants to play point because of his physical, I guess, limitations, I should say, from working his way lower into the rotation. Maybe he wants to play point because he fits the mold. But I think that he truly does score so well. I would play him off ball right now. He's got really solid handles. He can do a bunch of different things getting into the paint. He also, something interesting that I noticed about him, he's a lefty, and he truly does work well with his left hand, but this is something you don't typically see from a lot of different point guards that have solid handles coming out of high school. They don't really utilize their offhand, and this kid seems to be very comfortable with it. He on different occasions will throw up a floater in the lane and utilize his right hand to do so. On both sides of the line, whether that be on the left side or the right side. He will utilize that right hand because it's just simply the more effective way to knock down the shot. He utilizes his right hand a lot when it comes to dribbling and driving. He looks perfectly fine and comfortable, nothing out of the ordinary, which is really positive to see. He can switch comfortably at this level. It makes you assume that he will be pretty dang good at handling the ball at the next level. The only critique I would have is while he is good with the ball in his hands, he could be a little bit tighter with his handle. I think he's kind of a little too floaty, I would say. It's not necessarily a speed thing. I think it's just once you get to college and once you handle the ball more, you're going to be more tight with your handle, I think. Does he need that? Not necessarily, But if he wants to be a more effective downhill player, I think that with his height and weight, he's going to have to be a little bit more tight and compact with the way that he utilizes the ball and the way that he actually drives to the basket. But that's not to say he can't dribble the ball. He's actually very, very good at it, like I just mentioned. And again, he's a good outside shooter. This kid is not afraid to take shots. He's good in isolation. He's good coming off ball screens. He's really, really good in spot-up situations as well. Very aggressive and confident when it comes to scoring outside of the arc. At different times, I think there are some separation creation issues, but he's hitting the shots, it looks like, in the form. I don't have anything to complain about as a I guess slightly undersized guard. I would say he is very confident in taking those jumpers and knocking them down. He's got deep range as well, which is something that I think you have to respect. If I had to compare him to a player that we've seen in college recently, I'd compare him to somebody that we saw in the transfer portal earlier this offseason who played at Northern Illinois, David Coit. But this kid obviously is like 3 or 4 inches taller than Coit is, but both of them are lefties, both of them really aggressive when it comes to driving, shooting, scoring overall. And then you look at his numbers during the EYBL circuit. I mean, he averaged over 15 a game. He really did more scoring than anything in this one. 3.2 rebound, 3.6 per game, 6 assists per game while playing with Team Durant, actually, on the EYBL circuit. And when you look at his college numbers, I believe it's about 14 points. He's averaging over 4 rebounds and assists per game, almost actually 5 rebounds per contest. But I really do think that he's got a ways to go if he wants to really show off his point guard abilities. I mean, he's a very good player shooting. He's a very good player scoring. But if you want to work on your distribution, I think he's got to work on his handle just a little bit. If we're critiquing, this is a very good player. I just want to be clear. This is a very good player coming out of high school, polished 4-star. But if we're critiquing, and I think that he's trying to improve his game, he said as much, I think he's going to have to work a little bit more at point just to kind of get that under his belt. He said this in a recent, I believe, interview with On3. He said, I feel like the line between combo guard and point guard are blurred, but I definitely want to run the point in college. Most of the schools recruiting me want me as a point guard, and some want me as a point guard who can play off the ball. So I think he's going to have to at his high school, and if he does get on any other circuits, he's going to have to try and work on that a little bit. And as far as his recruitment goes, I should say. He said, I think I'll cut my list by late June or early July. By that time, everyone will have had the chance to see me. I don't know when I'll decide, just whenever it's the right time. I'm not rushing anything. If you want to look at his roster, or excuse me, his offer sheet, I should say. Maryland, Virginia Tech, Brown, Bryant, Florida State, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Michigan, Nebraska, Penn State, St. John's, Syracuse, Villanova, Virginia, West Virginia, Vandy, a bunch of different teams in here, Oregon as well, a bunch of different teams kind of in that northeast area, and then also a couple different teams out west. But it's some solid schools that could really utilize a player like him. Again, Kentucky has not offered, but they are definitely interested. A player that I think would work well with Mark Pope, just as far as, aggression and scoring from outside of the arc goes. Somebody I think that would work well in a up-tempo, fast-paced system. Acaden Lewis, excited to see what he thinks about Kentucky's visit again on June 17th. Jaxson Robinson, officially a Kentucky Wildcat. Big news for Kentucky. We're going to be talking a ton about the roster, the rotation, usage, how these different players, Robinson, Brea, all these different wings are going to be in this rotation, how they're going to be utilized. It's going to be so much fun. I cannot wait to start talking about it with you guys over the next couple of months. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, wherever you are tuned in, please go ahead and do so. It's a perfect time to join up. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.